Hi everyone. Today I'll be talking about self-improvement. What is self-improvement? Self-improvement is a concept that's been around for thousands of years. The earliest works concerning it date back to as early as 2800 BC. It has gotten popular recently amongst teenagers on platforms such as YouTube and TikTok, which made a lot of greedy influencers take advantage of this trend and preach their false and controversial ideas. This gave self-improvement a really bad connotation due to the naivety of teenagers who don't know how to separate the bad from the good. But at its core, I believe self-improvement is a very helpful concept anyone can benefit from. Self-improvement boils down to two simple parts: increasing what counts as delayed gratification and reducing what counts as instant gratification. Now, as some of you might ask, what do these terms even mean? Instant gratification is every activity that's easy to achieve, gives you instant pleasure, and has long-term negative consequences. As an example, let's take smoking. You take a cigar, you light it up, you inhale, and you instantly feel relaxed. But what this does is that it gives you an addiction and long-term health complications such as lung cancer and might lead to early death. Another instant gratification activity I'm sure everyone suffers from or had suffered from at some point in their lives is social media addiction. Scrolling Instagram or TikTok for hours overloads your brain's reward system. As stated on lehealth.org, you get into what's called a dopamine cycle. While scrolling social media, your brain receives a flood of dopamine. In the moment, it feels wonderful, but leaves us craving for more, which traps us in a cycle of craving, response, and reward. This desensitizes us, and by that I mean the more dopamine your brain receives, the less effective it is. Now you find yourself demotivated, and some people start to feel like their life is no longer worth living. This is why I believe social media addiction is one of the leading causes of rising depression rates in teenagers, since they're constantly glued to their phones. Delayed gratification, on the other hand, is the complete opposite of instant gratification. It's every activity that feels like a chore to do at present, but it has massive long-term benefits. Let's picture this. You improve 1% every day by doing these good habits. This means you're 37 times better in a whole year. Now the math for this is pretty simple. You just take 1.01 and raise it to the power of 365. Let's take that math and present it as a graph. I'll take the horizontal axis as the time axis and the vertical axis as the reward axis. We'll get a curve that looks something like this. During the first few weeks, you don't notice much change, but the rewards really start to kick in later. This is why it's called delayed gratification. To prove this, I'll use the example of exercising. During the first few weeks of going to the gym, you don't notice much change. But let's say 6 months later, you start noticing real changes in how your body looks, an improvement in your mental health, and higher levels of confidence. Now that I've done explaining what delayed and instant gratification mean, we get into the topic of building habits. My next few ideas are going to be borrowed from a book called Atomic Habits by James Clear. To start a habit or get rid of one, you must understand how a habit is formed. It can be broken down to 4 steps. Number 1 is the cue. Number 2 is the response. Number 2 is the craving. Number 3 is the response. And number 4 is the reward. As an example, you get a phone notification. That's the cue. You want to know who messages. That's the craving. You open up your phone. That's the response. And you get to know who messages. That's your reward. The more this happens, the more the cue gets associated with the reward. And next time you get a phone notification, you just open up your phone unconsciously. James Clear suggests 4 laws to manipulate the system in our advantage. Law number 1 is make it obvious. The very thing you should start with is observing yourself in your daily habits. Then what you want to do is write them down and categorize them based on negative, neutral, or positive. Now that you know your starting point, everything becomes quite more convenient. To start a new habit, you must make it more specific. Give it a specific time and a specific place. Instead of saying, I want to start reading, you would say, I will read at 8 p.m. on my bed. You can also use what's called habit stacking, is that you take a previous good habit that you already do and use it as a cue for a new habit you want to start. So, for example, you take showers every day at 8 p.m. You would say, I will read a book on my bed after I take a shower. Another very important element in how successful you are at starting new habits is your environment. You should really consider redesigning your environment by making cues for good habits visible and cues for bad habits invisible. For example, you should probably place your books on your nightstand instead of leaving them on the bookshelf where you practically don't see them. Law number 2 is make it attractive. Research shows that dopamine levels not only rise during the reward phase, but also during the craving phase. Let's say you have a day out tomorrow. Just thinking about the day out tomorrow and what you're gonna do can be actually more rewarding than the day out itself. So, James Clear suggests to use what's called temptation bundling. Is you do an activity you wanna do with an activity you have to do. A very common example here would be doing your homework while listening to music. Your social circle heavily influences your habits. Someone whose friends are all smokers is much more likely to also be a smoker. Someone whose friends all work out is much more likely to also work out. This was the case for one of my friends who's been wanting to work out for a very, very long time, but really couldn't get into it, until all of our friends started going to the gym. He naturally joined in, out of pressure to not feel like an outsider. Law number 3 is make it easy. It should be pretty self-explanatory that a hard habit would be hard to stay consistent with. So you should consider making your good habits as easy as you possibly can, and your bad habits as hard as you can. Let's say you have a bad habit of zoning out during work and you start scrolling your social media or something. You should probably give your phone to your friend and tell them to hide it somewhere. Now, if you want to zone out, you have to actually get out of your chair and start looking for that phone, which is way less convenient. Law number 4 is make it satisfying. Your brain is automatically programmed to repeat things that are easy to do and instantly reward you. James Clear says, what's immediately rewarded is repeated, and what's immediately punished is avoided. So taking advantage of this, we could add a slight reward at the start of every good habit we do, and a slight punishment at the start of every bad habit we do. For example, you have a bad habit of scrolling social media too much. What you want to do is make a contract with your friend. For every hour you scroll, you owe him X amount of money. A way to add rewards to your habits is making progress checks or progress bars. How I use this personally is I have the list of all the exercises I do in the gym, and each time I accomplish a new personal record, I write it down, and it sort of becomes like a game of achieving new personal records, which keeps me motivated to come back and work harder. A very important thing to keep in mind is to keep the chain of consistency going. Keep the chain of consistency going. It's very important. Just some things you don't feel like going, and maybe you feel tired, but just showing up to the gym and doing 10% of your workout is very essential if you want to be consistent in the long run. Now, I want to also mention another method of getting rid of bad habits, known as dopamine detox. Essentially what it is abstaining from an activity for a short duration of time throughout a long interval of time and slowly increasing that short interval of time. A lot of so dopamine detox is quite a new concept, which is why the research concerning it isn't fully concluded yet. But a lot of people say that it works. Naturally, I got very interested in it, and I tried it myself. So how I used it is with my gaming addiction. I used to play every day. So I started playing one day and resting the next day. After 2 weeks, I started playing one day and resting 2 days, and so on and so forth. This freed up a lot of time for healthier hobbies such as music or digital art. Now we're coming to the end of my speech, and I want to clarify a few key things. The first thing is that you're probably going to fail a lot. It might sound demotivating, but you should still keep pushing, because you're going to develop more mental strength and more self-discipline that's going to help you stay more consistent. The second thing is that nobody can change in a single day. This is why most people who say, "New year, new me," fail. It's because they fail to realize that it's pretty much impossible to keep up with a massive change in your life. So I advise you to take this change very slowly throughout a long period of time. Thanks for tuning in.